I'm Talissa.
I'm Grace.
And today we're doing a presentation on environmental impacts of livestock operations. So an intensive livestock operation, what is it? It's an operation that is large scale, for example, like factory farms or feedlots. These operations have large quantities of external energy inputs, and they require raising large numbers of animals for marketing purposes. These animals are raised in an operation that can support a large number of animals, but large-scale operations have a greater possibility for problems with diseases and animal waste. Alberta is home to 69% of cattle production in Canada and is 41.6% of the national herd, which is approximately 4.9 million beef cattle.
So what are the environmental impacts of an intensive livestock operation? So some of the impacts that affect intensive livestock operations are land and water use, nutrient cycles, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, and human health concerns. Water and land use. So feed production is the main resource in which livestock use land and water. Approximately 60% of a cattle feed ration is made of grass. This is in terms of dry matter content, which is the amount of feed material there is without any moisture content involved. The land that is related to the production of these feed types is approximately a quarter of emerged land with management practices from intensively managed pastures, which are pastures that are planted and fertilized, compared to rangeland pastures, which are dependent of rainfall. The other 40% of a feed ration comes from crop residues, crop products, and byproducts. Intensive dairy operations and feedlots use grains and byproducts, which are mostly from an industrial crop production. This can contribute to environmental impacts such as eutrophication, water depletion, and emissions of pesticides. It is estimated that 33% of the global water footprint of animal production is from beef cattle, which is almost 10% of the global water footprint of total agriculture production. And then nutrient cycles. So it's estimated that cattle contribute 56 to 60% of the yearly total of 75 to 138 grams of nitrogen, and that is what is excreted by all livestock species. This places a burden on the environment due to the low efficiency of the nutrient retention. So this means that between 55 and 95% of nitrogen and approximately 70% of phosphorus are ingested by livestock, and then they get excreted as urine or feces. And then manure is recycled as a fertilizer for pastures and crops. However, a large amount of the manure gets lost to the environment through greenhouse gas emissions as well as leaching and runoff. The efficiency of this is greater in areas where feed is balanced and catered to the needs of the animals, and animal efficiency is generally greater than the herd efficiency.
Alright, now we'll move on to greenhouse gas emissions. So with greenhouse gas emissions, inorganic ammonium compounds are formed by gaseous ammonia, which is emitted from livestock production. And then also cattle are the main contributor of sector emissions with 65% of CO2 emissions. Beef cattle contribute to 41% of CO2 emissions, whereas dairy cattle contribute to only 20% of CO2 emissions. So there is a difference with emissions and their intensity between the production of dairy herds and beef herds. So the differences are mainly due to dairy herds producing both milk and beef, whereas beef herds are only strictly producing beef. And then we will move on to biodiversity. So biodiversity is considered an impact that is located at the endpoint of an environmental ecosystem. This means that environmental impacts, for example, land and water use, a nutrient cycle, and GHG emissions do affect the impact of biodiversity in an ecosystem. Land use is one of the most important factors of biodiversity and has 3 types of habitat modifications. So one of the types is destruction of undisturbed habitats, for example, the Amazon rainforest. The second one is land degradation. This is inappropriate grazing methods, and management, for example, overgrazing. And the last one, that habitat modification yields a positive biodiversity effect with the maintenance of semi-natural grassland habitats. So nutrient pollution is caused from beef production and is a direct link to biodiversity, and this occurs at several stages with livestock production. And now we'll go to human health concerns. So in highly populated areas, livestock presence is in a proximity to residential areas can be a high risk concern for people. This is becoming a big increase in large scale livestock operations within urban areas, and this can pose as health risks for respiratory problems coming from the emissions of the livestock production. In a particular region of the world, and specifically Asia, with the current situation of large-scale livestock productions and their operations, they're considered it to be a natural experiment. Residents are becoming exposed to harmful bacteria and viruses and air pollutants. So the air quality is diminished in livestock farming areas, such as in Asia, and this is due to fine particles and gases in the air that are being released, pathogenic viruses and bacteria, and can also be found in airborne matter, and this is surrounding livestock farms. Zoonotic infections are caused by germs that spread between animals and people, and the infections can range from mild symptoms to illnesses and even death. And this is becoming a big problem with livestock operations being so close to urbanized areas that are so high populated. Pneumonia is also to be found as an increased respiratory problem in these densely populated livestock areas, especially with goats and poultry farms. And
for our final thoughts, we found this video basically sums up what we think about the environmental impacts of intensive livestock operations.
So we're just gonna play it for you. It's about 3 minutes long.
My favorite part about ranching is being a steward and recognizing the treasure that we have here. Our intention is to leave it better than we found it.
As farmers and food producers, we've been sustainable for generations, if not centuries, because the goal is to leave our land base in as good a shape or better for the next generation than what we received it.
I'm a fourth generation rancher. My kids and my nephews will hopefully be the fifth. When I think about the environment and the impact we're having, I think it's a positive impact. The healthier the grass, the healthier the water, the healthier our animals are.
Cattle production occurs all across Canada, but the vast majority of the time where you see cattle being raised, it's in places where it's too hilly or too stony or too dry or too boggy to raise crops.
Grazing and grassland ecosystems was part of the normal evolution of that ecosystem to start with. So grasslands that are not grazed are not healthy.
The cow-calf sector is a grass-based production system. That grass feeds the cows, that grass contributes to maintaining watersheds, that grass helps sequester carbon, that grass helps keep the soil in place, that grass helps support biodiversity, and it helps support the natural environment.
There's a lot of stuff in the media now about our environmental footprint. I would like the public to know that most of us try very hard to do things properly. Most of our land is native grassland that's never been cultivated. And of course, as science progresses, we can see more and more things that we do that can be harmful or things that can be beneficial if we're smarter about it.
The other sector of our industry is the feedlot sector. So a lot of animals all brought together where they're managed on a pretty high-tech system to get them to grow as efficiently as they can.
One of the criticisms will come to the use of grain in beef cattle diets in Canada with our feedlot production systems. But the truth is, much of that grain has already been discarded from use for human consumption.
We're about 25 miles from a grain ethanol plant. The byproduct that comes out of those plants is excellent high-quality feedstuffs that we can feed to cattle. So it's a form of recycling that we can do here on farm. We're utilizing resources the best we can
One of the environmental impacts that there's been a lot of questions about is water use in beef production. Water gets used, but the water doesn't get used up. It cycles, goes back into the river, it evaporates, it rains down or snows down again.
People want to know if the water is clean and clear. We drink our water here, right from the ground, from the same trough that the cows drink from.
By producing beef, we are maintaining the natural environment. And by raising cattle on this grass-based production system, we're taking land that couldn't be used to grow other food and turning that into highly valuable, highly nutritious protein that benefits human health.
We live off this land, and if we destroy it, it destroys our living and ourselves.
Healthy food is raised on healthy land. This is where good food is raised.
So that was our little video for you guys. So that's our presentation. Thanks for watching it, and that's it.